Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of HUMED, Human Medicine. This is your host, Dr. David Spiro. I am incredibly delighted today to have a friend, a former colleague, as one of our guests, Carey Roselee. And Carey, it's awesome to have you on the show.
David, thank you so much for being here. I know it's been a long time since we've connected, but some of those friendships they don't notice time, and so I'm glad that's one of our pillars of our friendship. So very happy to be here today. Thank you.
Yeah, and I recall, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I recall that you were maybe just graduated from APRN school or just starting at Summerlin Hospital in Las Vegas when we started working together. And I remember how dedicated and passionate you were about patient care and learning as much as you can early on in your experience. I remember that very well. So can you share a little bit about how you got to today? Can you give the audience a little bit about your background?
Sure. So it actually started when I was 13 years old. I was a hospital transporter. My mom worked at the hospital, and I was fortunate enough to do that bring your child to work day business way back in the 90s. I know. And so I was there, and I met beautiful, wonderful, nuanced folks at the hospital, which was in Peoria, Illinois. And so I started as a little transporter, and then I was one of the very first employees. I was 14. I was 14 when I was employed at the hospital. I had to go to court and say, oh yeah, I'm actually working and I want to do this. And so at 14, I started working in the hospital as a little transporter. And so I would transport patients back and forth to radiology. And that was really where I think my love of the care of people started, because I got to walk around the hallways and just talk to patients when they were going to their desk, very easy to do, very fun. And I got to meet nurses and doctors and other clinicians and things like that at 14, super impressionable part of our life. And so I don't know at that moment if I had dedicated myself to medicine, but I knew at that moment I wanted to be like the way those other people were. I just wanted something like that. And so, if we fast forward 30 years later, I'm still walking around hospital hallways. And so that journey for me, I think I've had actually every role in a hospital, which is incredibly unique to be able to bring to bedside medicine and to, and as we talk in the future about private practice. And so I went from being a transporter, then I went and got my EMT license because I knew the ER was built different. And so I was 18. I got my EMT license. I worked in the hospital as well as on the streets of Peoria, Illinois. Very interesting. I did 10 years of that. And so while I was working as an EMT, I was in nursing school because I had developed several mentors along the way. And so one of them was a nurse practitioner. It was my mom's really good friend. She was like a kind of a pillar in our house, and her name was Teresa. And so she was a nurse practitioner. And so I knew, and this was when nurse practitioners were not really a career. I mean, a handful of women were doing it, probably also men, but I only knew women. And so as I knew Teresa, I then actually developed the desire to become an actual nurse practitioner. So I was like, okay, well, this is the goal, that I want to be a nurse practitioner. I'm in high school. I'm about to go to college, nursing school. I'm going to just really emulate Teresa. Great. She's a psychiatric NP, by the way. Great, phenomenal human. So that's what I did. I went to nursing school. And each step of the way, if you hear the number of years that it took me, there was a lot of effort in what I was doing, simply because no one in my life had graduated high school or college. I mean, I came from extremely modest background. Again, no college graduates in my family, so I was learning as I go, but my mom was really pivotal in putting me in front. She hadn't been to college, but she put me in front of people who really, she knew that I wanted to do what they were doing. So even though she hadn't gone to college or done anything like that from an education standpoint, this is how that was her gift to me, was to kind of show me what that looked like. So then I worked, interestingly enough, I worked as a medical assistant in a 2-room school clinic for a grant-based part of the nursing school in Indiana. So at this point I had moved to Indiana. And so I got to know essentially undocumented humans, their struggle. A lot of it was border medicine. Some of it was patients who we're talking no access to care. So I went from working in a hospital to really literally standing in a middle school in the middle of nowhere, in Indianapolis, by the way. The school was in Indianapolis, but like I'm literally, if you're inside this school, you're talking to people who have just done some incredible things as people to get a better life for themselves and that kind of thing. So that was part of what I did as you have to do like a few little volunteer work. Well, I thought that was going to be volunteer work, and it turned into be doing it for 3 years. So it wasn't volunteer work. Became essential into fabric of who I am, and when it comes to giving back to people. And then beyond that, again, with this knowledge of becoming a nurse practitioner, I became a nurse. And it took me, I think, 10 years to become a nurse. And so I was a nurse, and that moment and we'll talk about it here in a little bit story time wise, but that moment I decided to become a pediatric nurse was probably embedded in those experiences that I had with these little kids, chasing them around the middle school and enjoying that family aspect of very large Hispanic families. And so I chose a career. Having done emergency medicine, I chose pediatric emergency nursing, and I worked at a level 1 trauma center in Indianapolis. And that trauma center was arguably one of the hardest things I've done as a nurse. I was a new graduate nurse, and I think it fortified my personhood. So I was, again, with the nurse practitioner, I decided I'm going to work the minimum amount I need to apply to NP school, so nurse practitioner school. And I knew I was going to continue pediatric medicine. I knew it. I mean, it wasn't like I'm a little bit unsure. I was 100%, having done EMS and then now having been a pediatric trauma nurse, it was unequivocal I was going to be a pediatric nurse practitioner, period. And I was lucky enough to get in to school on the first try. That was a gift that was immeasurable in how important it was for me to have been really. It showed me that all of this work that I had done, it actually could look like something. And it was these little tiny gifts that I had been given along the way. But I think probably between you and I, when I was sitting at these interviews, they're probably like, oh, wow, you've probably hung out in most places. So why don't you come be, nurse practitioner? And so when I did decide to do pediatric nurse practitioner, that program was attached to the backside of the hospital. So it was really cool. I got to be in this massive academic center. And so when it came to going to school, it was just bedrock. It was inside of that fabric of who I was. And so, and it didn't take long. It was the fastest thing I had done, because I had at that point became very professional at like being a student and things like that. And so NP school, that was just the 3 years that it normally takes. And so my family and I had decided when I was done with NP school, because I had done peds trauma for so long, that I was not going to do a trauma career, but that I was going to just do a community-based pediatric ER. So when I went to kind of lift my gaze, I knew I wanted to come up and out of the hospital I was in, because between you and I 100% would have stayed there, but they're a fellowship-driven program. They're a program that really does a lot of like residents, big, heavy lifting, teaching, big research. And so there wasn't going to be the kind of medicine I wanted to provide as a nurse practitioner. It wasn't going to be available to me at that facility. And it was really, for me at least, I was either going to work at that hospital or I could work anywhere. And so I lifted my gaze like to literally all of the United States. And so
And
pediatric,
you landed in Summerlin, Nevada,
that is
Las
correct. And
Vegas.
that's where we met. Yes.
That's where we met. What year
Yeah.
was that? Was that 2017?
2015. 15.
2015. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. So, a couple things that you brought up, a lot to talk about even before we talk about your story, but I did not know that, or maybe you could share with the audience. So, if you want to apply to APRN school and you're a nurse graduate, do most APRN schools, if you want to become a nurse practitioner, have a minimum number of hours that you have needed to work as a nurse before they will look at you as an applicant for APRN school? So you can't go directly from nurse school to APRN school. Is that fair, or is it different with every program?
You can now, but back then it was literally a requirement on paper that you had to be a practicing nurse for 3 years. And that was my school. And so now when I mentor others, I tell nurses immediate if you know what you want to immediately apply to school, and they do. And that's something that as we've evolved in the land of APRN, and that landscape looks a little different now than it did even 10 years ago. We have online programs now. We have a lot of more opportunities. And one of those is just like what you mentioned, you can go right into school now.
You also mentioned something that I think is very important, and I think that you and I have some commonalities, and we're kindred spirits, which I didn't know after working with you side by side, because I think we worked in a little closet-like space at
Little closet.
Summerlin. Little
Yeah.
closet, yeah. But I worked also as an EMT, and I also came from a family with no college graduates. And so you had said something that has always resonated with me, and I talk to uh, early learners about this all the time, which is the concept of mentorship. And,
Mm.
I'm assuming your mom was a strong mentor for you, and then
Yes.
you had said that she put you in front of people who could give you things that maybe she couldn't give, or just vary your experience. And in medicine, what I love, and the reason why I'm still teaching and in a teaching environment, is because I love to mentor others, and I also love to be mentored. I love the idea that um, there are so many more people in the world who are smarter and have different perspectives. It's the human nature of medicine, and it seems to me that mentorship is critical for us to all be successful. Would you agree with that or challenge that in any way?
I believe the goal of humanity is lifelong learning. And I think we
Mm.
do that in conjunction with people. And I think that mentorship, as we grow and ebb and flow, I think it looks different. And I think both for you and I, there is a place at some point in your life where you can reflexively look at having being mentored, actually mentoring those, and then looking at other people in our life, even at our age, where we are still being mentored. And so those things, when you start to kind of look back and forth, I think the common thread in all of that is the mentorship, or in another way of looking at it, manifesting. And so you really have to, when you want something, it may not be something you can put your finger on, but you can go find somebody who's done it or who's thought about it, and then you can start to do that thing. And so there is a huge benefit to mentors. And I still teach now. Part of what I find to be the human experience is that teaching, and I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, it's interesting because the other piece to mentorship is when you're mentoring someone else, if you're open to it, it's a bidirectional relationship. And
For
I
sure.
was today meeting with a fellow, first year. He's actually from Venezuela, a super wonderful human being. And we met and we to get to know each other and talk about a research project. And he showed me some things around Google Notebook and some other uh, technology that
Tech
I was
savvy stuff.
unaware of. Yeah, but I'm just I was there to help support him in his research stuff and get his project underway. But I came away with learning a number of things from him, and I think that when human beings in medicine are open to it, we're just learning from each other almost continuously.
Constantly. I totally agree. I totally
Yeah.
agree.
So that's a great segue into um, sort of the core of our program, which is a story. So I would love to hear one of your stories to share with the audience.
I think because I've had so many versions of myself, when I reflected on this podcast and I was like, it's such a heartfelt thing to be invited to something like this. It's so neat. And so I thought to myself, oh gosh, which is the one, there's so many, and I thought about the actual reason. And I, again, speaking with you, being that you're a pediatric emergency physician, and that's my passion too. I thought, okay, I'm going to tell a pediatric story because there's nothing like the child. And so when children are in the hospital, they don't know they're sick, or maybe they do, but they don't want to be there. And so they could be anywhere. And so we could spend a lot of time talking about parents and that experience for us as clinicians caring for that child parent dyad. But in this scenario, the story I wanted to tell was, I'll just set the stage very briefly. I was a student nurse, and my capstone was in I was gifted the position of pediatric burn. And I had checked the little box of mother, baby, and children on that form in college. And I was placed in the pediatric burn unit. And so this is that case where it solidified pediatric medicine for me. And I got to my shift and I put on the garb that you have to wear in the burn unit and the hat, you know how it goes. And I go into the tub room, and there's a patient in the tub, and he's got his little wraps on, and he's about to get unwrapped, to have his burn care. And I said, hey, my name's Carey. I'm one of the student nurses. How are you? And he said, hey, what are you doing here? And I said, oh, I'm just going to sit with you and let's, kind of chat and see how you're doing today. I said, what's your name? And he said, my name's Big Daddy. I said, oh my gosh. I said, oh, hi. But what's your other name, bud? And he was so confused. He said, my name's Big Daddy. I mean, as sure as he could be. And I was like, I looked around, my heart actually melted. And I said, okay, this is it right now. It's me. His name was Devon. It doesn't really matter what his actual name was, because guess what his name was? It was going to be Big Daddy for the entirety of that burn dressing change. And in the moment, as I was so nervous and I've got all my stuff on and I'm trying to be the best student I could be, none of that mattered. It was me. It was Big Daddy. It was the two of us getting his dressings done, getting his whole day. And at that point, I went home and I was like, this is a 10. I'm 100% going to do this for the rest of my life in some capacity. So that's my, and there's, as you know, too, there's a million of those stories, but it's, and I wrote about that.
So I want to talk a little bit about that experience, because when we're early on in our careers, I think that we tend to focus on the pure piece of medicine, which is I'm here to diagnose you. I'm going to diagnose you with this, and then I'm going to give you a medication so it can address that. And I've done my job. But I
Very
think what's
scientific.
really interesting, right? And you were there as a student, and your job was to, change the dressing and
Yes,
et
I
cetera.
was very task oriented.
But what I have found over time is that it's really the relationship that you end up, the human to human connection that you develop with each of our patients in different ways, that to me is the essence of healthcare. What are your thoughts about that?
Definitely. I think that healthcare is actually in reverse. It's care of health. And yes, there is tons of science. I'm a scientist. I believe in science. I believe in what I am doing in medicine. And I also believe that what we bring to that experience is the thing that gets the science done. And I think a lot in what we do in medicine, a lot of it is scientific. But when we look at pediatric medicine and even geriatric medicine, we don't have to, it doesn't have to be pediatric medicine. It could be medicine in general. But it is, can we get to that human component, for me at least, and then I've done my job. Because I think as early learners, and there is a component to this that is correct, but we should be very mindful of what we're doing and, make sure that the algorithm works and are we fitting into the correct, diagnosis treatment plan, and then hopefully discharge. But if we miss that human component, we'll never have gotten through that correctly. And in my humble opinion, if we can't get that information out, if we can't get that connection established, we're going to have a really hard time getting that scientific aspect communicated well to our parent or our patient in this case.
So many of us in emergency medicine, I have certainly had a convoluted, non-traditional path. And I know that it sounds like you were full-time at Summerlin and as a pediatric emergency medicine practitioner for many years. And my understanding now is you are transitioning or spending time working in your own private clinic. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So
yep.
can you talk a little bit for those that are unfamiliar? What drove you to explore more the private side of medicine versus working in an emergency department, which is incredibly public facing and has different missions? But I'm just curious what drove you into practice and what the focus of your practice is.
So it actually, when you reached out to me, I had just finished the last parts of, getting the sign out in my office and all that. I've been doing telemedicine for a while, maybe let's say like a year, maybe not quite a year, but I've been doing it for a little while. But I had decided to get an actual brick and mortar because that was what my patients wanted. But to answer your question, there was a moment, and I will still always work in a big corporate facility because it really facilitates that learning and mentoring that I enjoy doing. But there was a moment where I felt that I couldn't be as impactful as I had wanted to be. And so there was a shift where RSV season, it was a year and a half ago, and I can remember the moment where I was like, gosh, this is the moment that I really want. This is the moment that I'm going to actually do private medicine. And it was big shift, tons of nurses everywhere. There's only 2 providers, as you know. That hasn't changed, by the way. So it's just 1 APP and 1 attending physician. And there is 50, 60 children. And we're getting a ton of help from other, our adult providers, our other colleagues. And it was just all hands on deck. And patient needed ibuprofen. I went out to the waiting room and did my thing out there, came back, speaking to the nurses. They're going to get to it. A couple of hours in this, and the child was only there for fever and likely had a viral syndrome, wasn't having any other distress. And the child ended up actually having a febrile seizure in the waiting room.
Wow.
And at that moment, it hit my heart in a way that I think I was ripe for wanting something different. But I think at that moment, I was like, okay, gosh, this is a lot. Like, it's a lot from my heart. And having done corporate medicine at that point for 25 years, I don't think I had any more capacity in my tiny little human heart. And I really wanted to just have this, right? One-to-one, have that ability to make make that difference in a different kind of a way, not a better way, but just a different way. Because I always think there is room for, in our personhood, for our learning, I always think there is ways we can explore. And I think we should walk towards those things inside of ourselves. And as you and I know in medicine, you trust your gut. If something says this doesn't feel right, this patient experience, something doesn't feel right, I'm going to order this test. I don't really know why. And then an hour and a half later, you figure out, oh gosh, it was a UTI, or oh gosh, it was this or that. And in that moment, I didn't know what that moment felt to me, but I was like, I don't know. There's not another space inside of my heart. And at that moment, that grew this desire to do private practice. And so now what I do is I really highlight resilience and sort of human regulation. And I want to optimize because I'm not in the ER, right? Nothing's on fire. There's that little trash can, that cute little trash can that everything's on fire. Nothing's on fire. And so really what I want to do when I'm sitting in my office and I'm talking to a parent or a patient or whatever, I really want to optimize that human experience because we've all got one or two little tweaks of things we can do that if you're sitting in front of the right person and you have the right conversation, man, I could have just done that. And so that's my goal now in private practice is to have those one-on-one conversations. It feels a lot like a podcast. And I can look into that scenario and say, hey, let's highlight this. Let's put this to the side. And we can do that in a way that I actually just can't do it in a big facility.
I want to talk a little. I appreciate that, and I've been there many times when you're running around and you feel like you're not delivering the highest quality of care because
Yeah,
you're just being
for
torn
sure.
in different directions. But let's get to that exact moment because I'm curious about it and it's interesting to me. So the ED is busy, and for those of you that don't know, bronchiolitis, RSV bronchiolitis, is a very common condition that most children develop. Some children just get a little cold or an upper respiratory infection, but for some children, the virus invades the lung and causes increased work of breathing and respiratory distress. And sometimes children need oxygen to support them. We still don't have any modern medicine doesn't have a cure for it. It's mostly supportive care, but it's one of these viruses that usually happens in the late fall and winter time period. And when it happens, it can double or triple the amount of children that come to an emergency department seeking care. And it's scary because a parent knows their baby, even if the baby is a few weeks old to a few months old to a few years old. And when they see their baby breathing hard, it's very distressing for families. So there's that. But then you described that a child had a fever seizure, or what we call febrile seizures, in the waiting room, which are very scary events for families and can be very scary for people in healthcare because children are not conscious, they're having a seizure. Um, Fortunately, most febrile seizures, not all, but most febrile seizures are quite simple and resolve quickly. But getting back to that moment, what was it about that moment that was an epiphany for you? Was it a feeling of overwhelm? Did you feel like you weren't able to give the care that you wanted to give? What was it about that moment that was the aha moment that you wanted to do something different?
I think it was probably the culmination of like an entire 10 years of emergency medicine that at that moment I really felt different because I had wanted, it's the same as, every RSV season. You need more people. I need more. I need more. There's more children. I need more. And every hospital system, they provide more. I mean, there wasn't, this was not a lack of people being there. We had everyone there. Everyone was doing 100%. And it just, what the 100% from just a pure standpoint just wasn't going to be enough. And at that moment, it felt heavier on my heart because I think my capacity at that point had just, it had left the building. And so my capacity to want to have that happen again to me, I was like, gosh, I don't feel like my little raindrop. I'm like I'm not adding to this scenario. And I felt so sad and frustrated. And I felt like I couldn't do the thing that I wanted to do, which was get this little kiddo his Tylenol, or actually I'd ordered ibuprofen. And so I thought to myself, there's not a better way to do this. Couldn't have been sooner, this or that. It's just the way that winters go in all hospitals, not just our hospitals, any hospital across the nation. That's just how it goes. And so I was very sad. I think that's actually what I felt, was really, really sad that the unfortunate bypass of events had happened, but it had happened to me. I think I internalized that febrile seizure, it happened to me. And so I felt that I couldn't have been a part of the success or the solution because of the situational overwhelm that comes with huge volume during that time. And so that was probably the moment that I had where it actually had happened to me, versus you're doing your very best work and things are happening around you. And so we fortify ourselves in pediatric emergency medicine, and we say, anything can happen to us. We're a team. And that is actually true. And I still work in the ER now. I always will. I just felt at that moment I needed like a pressure release, like a tea kettle. And so I thought, okay, again, not giving up emergency. I never will. I love that. But I also wanted I think I needed a pivot. And so that was the moment of the pivot for sure.
Well, that's fascinating. So what is your vision for, and by the way, congratulations. I think what you're doing is courageous and brave. I was in a small town private group, but in a community clinic on the coast of Oregon for 5 years, paying off my debt. So, and I essentially built my own practice alongside of a mentor who had been there for 20 years. But so I do viscerally understand starting from zero and then growing. So would love to hear, based upon your tremendous experience of transporter, EMT, nurse, APRN, now 10 plus years working as a PZR physician in a very busy community ED. What's your vision? What is driving you now to do this kind of care?
I think when I had my eyes closed and I was thinking about what that would look like, I think what it looked like then and what it actually is now in practice is a little different. And I'll give a couple sentences about each. What I thought about, or what I envisioned initially, was I would take care of the ailing child in some capacity, and that would be fairly smooth, and everything would, I don't know, people would come to me and I would do some marketing, and it would be, I don't know, it would look like a little clinic that you drive by on the street, and it would just be me. And that is actually not what is happening at all. What I actually found is that I am going back into the community exactly like Farrington Middle School. So I'm finding that my value is best placed in large aggregates of children because, again, with emergency medicine, I don't find myself being as impactful, and I like that high volume of children. And so what I have now found as I work in schools, and again, here in Vegas, there's a bunch of schools, one big school system, CCSD, or Clark County School District. So I have meetings with them, and I see big aggregates of kids there. And then I certainly do my favorite people. If you reach out to me, whoever you are, give me a call. I mean, I had a call yesterday. A parent called me and said, "Hey, I think my kid has sinusitis." I said, "Let's jump on a call." We did a telemedicine call. Beautiful. Absolutely perfect. But what I have also found, which this was literally shocking to me, and I have done its own thing, is parents actually want some coaching. So they actually, when there are quiet times, because I know, and you know this too, David, when you're sitting in the emergency department and the child is well, we've done our scientific thing. It's viral syndrome. They're going to do very well. They have a competent immune system. But that parent, nope, they're not leaving. They can't leave. They're very fearful. And what do we do? We actually counsel the parent. Probably 2-to-1 time is spent counseling the parent
Sure.
than making that medical decision. Because that medical decision for us, great, sick, not sick, not sick, bye-bye. And so now what I've actually found my value in the community is with parents actually having questions about, am I doing this right? Am I getting ADHD care right for my child? Should I have put them on medicine? Shouldn't I have? I don't know. Am I doing the thing of parenting in a way that is beneficial to my child? And that, for me, I couldn't have known it. And I have responded. And now I yesterday had a parent coaching call. Fantastic. We talk about her kids and how she can do this and that in a different way. And it's really about that very tiny recalibration of the human experience. And for me, through the lens of parenting, and then also, providing that direct care, whatever the family needs. So those are the things that I'm finding that are not corporate medicine at all, that I enjoy, but I couldn't I when I was conjuring up this business of caring for the community, I didn't know that was going to be the case at all.
That's fascinating, and I can relate to that, and of course I relate to so much of what you've talked about. I think that many of our younger learners focus on, the anxiety is I'm not going to make the right diagnosis, and so they're focused on the
Sure.
diagnosis, focus on making the right diagnosis. But really, outside of making a right diagnosis, I think it's very important to educate, especially when you're in the P's world. And it's kind of what I love to do. It's
It's
part,
what I love
and the
to do.
Latin root of doctor is teacher, and we're all teachers. So I'm going to have you again back on as a guest. There's so much to talk about, but it has been a pleasure having you on the show. So usually we kind of wrap it up by uh, asking the guest, if you had to take one thing away from our chat, one teaching point or learning point or um, something of that nature, what would it be?
This chat today, it really touched my heart. It is something that I will take with me. This is a very, very neat thing that you provide to the community, David, I have to say. But I think the one thing that I would take away from this podcast is the concept of forever mentorship, in honoring that in kindred spirit inside of ourselves, in that we never, ever stop learning. And I think that us sharing this connection today just shows that there was a period of time where you were my mentor. I was a new
Mm,
graduate. I leaned on you a lot. You had big words, you, you had a lot to offer. You kind of just sit in this little tiny box together, and you take on the spirit of the person with you. And you were part of those formative years of my mentorship. And now we can collaborate together as two folks that just have a common thread of loving to take care of people. And really, the essence of both of who we are is the human experience. Again, humed. So, um, the forever mentor is what I would take away from this.
Awesome. Well, it was an honor working with you back then, and it's an honor to have you as a guest here on our show. And again, what you're doing and the change and the pivot in your career is courageous and brave. And anyone who receives care from you is certainly incredibly fortunate. And I have no doubt, based upon your passion, your drive, and who you are as a human, I have no doubt that you're going to be wildly successful in private practice, and I wish you the best of luck. So, listeners, thank you for joining. We actually have now, wahoo, over 1,000 YouTube subscribers, and that is a big milestone for us because we're not really out there. It's been very organic in terms of the growth. We're not advertising, etc.
That's huge.
It is, and I think it's because we have amazing guests like you. So users and audience, please subscribe. We want subscribers, and you can subscribe on YouTube, on Spotify, wherever you hear your podcasts. This is your host, Dr. David Spiro, signing off. I hope you all have a great day.
Thanks for listening to HUMED with David Spiro, MD. If you like this episode, make sure you're subscribed on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast platform. The video versions are also available on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe and hit the bell there so that you never miss a future episode.